On the west coast of India, in northern Kerala, certain religious festivals take place during the dry season in private and communal sanctuaries in honor of the Theyyam, some 450 divinities or deified dead. These Theyyam become incarnate by possessing dancers who come from the lower castes and have developed this speciality. The sanctuaries are found in Kavu, sacred groves. One of the sanctuaries of Mushilot Bhagavati, the glorious Mushilot, is located near the village of Kaitheri. It is a family sanctuary. Access to the sacred enclosure is by a long masonry ramp. The entrance is marked by a Kal Vilaku, a monumental oil lamp. At the center of the enclosure stands the temple of Mushilot Bhagavati, which shelters her effigy. At the back of the temple is her throne. To the north stretches a raised area on which sit the altars of Narambil Bhagavati and Kanangad Bhagavati. Other altars are dedicated to Vishnamurti and to Rayara Mangalam. Rows of seating have been built on three sides of the enclosure to accommodate the faithful. A shelter is there for those who will represent the goddess Mushilot Bhagavati and participate in her epiphany. Another shelter, set up on top of the seating, is where the dancers apply their makeup. A colonnaded building is reserved for dignitaries, and in front of this is a large circular well. A stone-built kiosk is for the sale of offerings, while another, covered with an awning, protects the dignitary who must oversee the correct performance of the rituals. Outside the enclosure there are other altars and an area marked off by a low wall where the dancer who will incarnate Vishnamurti can prepare himself. Lastly, a large four-roomed building surrounded by a porch hosts the meal of the faithful. The celebrations are spread over 3 days and more than 2,000 faithful attend. During the days preceding the festival, dancers and musicians arrive and settle with their costumes and accoutrements into the shelters that are reserved for them. Meanwhile, the organizers choose which divinity will be incarnated by which dancer. These latter then enter into a period of fasting and prayer. Over the first 2 days of the festival, each dancer has received from the priest of the sanctuary a banana leaf full of burning wicks, nuts and leaves. This banana leaf, with wicks alight, is passed 3 times above the statue or altar of the relevant divinity in order to gain its power. Then, in front of the temple or altar, the dancers chant the story of the divinity or that of the deified dead that they will incarnate. Then, in front of the temple or altar, the dancers chant the story of the divinity or of the deified dead that they will incarnate from birth to deification. These chants are called thotam, a word that means birth, origin, or creation. Once the thotam of each divinity has been chanted, the dancers prepare for the second phase, where they will appear metamorphosed into gods. We attend the last day of the celebrations, when 4 Theyyam appeared in succession. After Kanangad Bhagavati, to whom a cockerel was sacrificed, and to whom the faithful came in consultation, it was the turn of Vishnamurti. The preparations for his appearance began with makeup in the image of the divinity. This can take up to 2 hours, during which the dancer recites invocations. Other assistants have prepared the costume, composed of a crown, a wide skirt made of bands of coconut fibre, bracelets and anklets. The dancer is led into the sanctuary in front of the divinity that he will incarnate. He circles the temple and pays a first homage to the god. The assistants finish dressing him. After being presented to the assembled faithful, Vishnumurti returns to the temple once more. He starts to dance, then prostrates himself before the temple, then begins a new sequence of dancing. Returning to the temple, he takes up a sword and resumes his spinning dance. At the end of his dance, he is taken to his altar and sat upon his throne. The faithful approach to consult him, and this oracular seance can last for a full hour. This continues while another Theyyam progresses. This is the goddess Puliorkali, who only appears in the sanctuary every 12 years. The dancer is dressed in a hooped skirt of pleated material, wearing false breasts and an enormous semicircular headdress. He performs several dance sequences armed with a crooked sword. Finally, he stands on his throne, then sits facing the temple. Swaying from left to right, he receives the faithful and blesses them. During the midday break, a meal is served to all the community in the dining building nearby. The faithful form a long queue and are served in dishes reserved for this event. Seated on the porch, they enjoy a thali of rice and different sauces, accompanied by a sweetmeat. The food has been prepared throughout the morning. Once the meal is over, they come out from the building and go to wash their dishes. An hour later, the last divinity, Mushalot Bhagavati, appears. She is led into the enclosure from her shelter, and, sitting on her throne behind a piece of material, the final touches are put to her costume. In front of the temple, the faithful experience an ordeal by fire, running over burning coals. And then they gather around the goddess as she receives a huge headdress and metal globes that cover her eyes. Carrying a torch in each hand, she begins to walk around the temple, swaying gently and making regular movements with the torches. Mushalot Bhagavati is the principal goddess of the Vanya community. She has more than 100 sanctuaries in the Kannur district. Many stories are told of her origins, but the most famous is that she was a Brahmin child who, as she grew, demonstrated a great understanding of all sciences and of the Vedas. When she was 12 years old, a relation came to see her and had her participate in a sort of competition where a group of learned men fired questions at her. Over 2 days, the questions and answers flew back and forth, and the child always came out victorious. Frightened by the threat she might pose, some of the scholars decided to set her a trap. On the third day, they asked her what was the finest of all experiences, to which she replied, "The passion of love." Then they asked what was the most painful experience, to which she replied, "Childbirth." Hearing this, some of them accused her of having replied so swiftly because she had already lived these two experiences, and thus she was no longer a virgin, and so she was banished from the community. She left her home and marched to the north. Hungry and tired, she came to the temple of Shiva, where she prayed, standing upright on glowing coals. A Vanya passed by with a jar of oil, and she asked him to throw some oil on the coals, and so she disappeared in the flames. This young Brahmin became a goddess and descended to earth. She drank from the sacred spring of the Mushalot family. She took the name of this family and asked them to build her a temple. These particular rituals of the gods descending to earth and their incarnation in dancers of low caste, who thus become the gods themselves and are venerated by the high caste Brahmins, happen every day during the dry season. So, just north of the Thalassery River, every day at 12:30, the faithful gather around the goddess in the little sanctuary of Bhadrakali. Sheltering under huge trees, the sanctuary includes an altar surrounded by an unmarked sacred area that is not open to women. A building decorated with a representation of Bhadrakali is for the dancer to prepare his makeup and for holding sacred objects. In front of this building there is a place for offerings. A stairway leads down to the river, an important part of the ritual. An adjacent kiosk sells offerings, and a bench along the wall of the enclosure gives the faithful a place to rest. After a first turn around the altar, the goddess goes down to the river. She comes back up and receives garlands of flowers that women place around her neck. She then resumes her dance in front of the altar. At the end of the dance, she sits upon her throne and receives the faithful to whom she offers advice and blessings.